Okay, right now I'm watching a YouTube video. Uh, a guy is trying to show off all of his homemade camp cook gear, and a lot of it's really cool. I mean, he's got some great ideas. it's When I go to sleep, I try to put something educational on, and sometimes when I wake up, I'm watching something completely different than what I went to sleep watching. Um, like some mornings, I'll wake up after watching something like on the Battle of the Bulge or on how steam engines are made or something like that, or maybe something about the Sherman or things like that. You know, I'm really into the machines themselves, and I'm also into the people themselves. It's a lot of history. The more you learn about it, the more you see things coming. If you know there's a mountain lion in the area and it's got a history eating people's dogs, probably gonna want to keep your dogs inside at night. Am I wrong? So this guy is, talking about a lot of the same stuff as the guy that was on the link that I put up here yesterday in one of the videos about the guy with the get home bag. Now, there's a lot of names for these. There's the go bag, the get home bag, there's probably 5 or 6 different names, and each one of these bags has a different intent and purpose. It's best to just consolidate it all into one if you can. Something that you can take with you everywhere. Part of the way that you can do that is by getting rid of non-essential crap. If you've ever been to a kitchen camp, then you know what the hell I'm talking about. A lot of the stuff that you have at a kitchen camp, you don't pack it in. You know, when we had the kitchen camp up at 37 and a half over by Nederland, there were some people who brought up strings and ropes and stuff like that. But for the most part, everything that we made our camp out of was stuff that was laying on the ground. Um, there's a lot of people who are not clean with their campsite when they leave. And, well, there's a lot of people like me who will walk around. We're up in the mountains anyway. The stuff is bugging us anyway. I'm OCD about that garbage being in my fucking woods. Well, you find stuff that you can make things out of. I've seen people boil water in plastic bottles. And a lot of y'all, you think, well, how does that work? It's plastic. Plastic melts. Yeah, but that's number one, polyethylene, polyethylene terephthalate. It takes like 276 degrees to melt the stuff. That's a lot higher melting or a lot higher temperature than bringing water to a boil, isn't it? And then you're talking about the fact that it's thin walled. So the water inside is actually keeping the plastic too cool to melt. But you don't need to go up there with a bunch of plastic bottles. People are going to leave them. People do leave them. You think you cleaned up the side of the road and you did a good job, and then you get somebody at the kitchen camp who's got a vehicle. So all of a sudden, everybody's riding down into Boulder to get all of their supplies. And when the person with the vehicle leaves or gets arrested or they have to do some other running around or some other errands or they go see their family, then you start walking again and you go, hey, we just cleaned this stuff up a month ago and it looks like there's about 6 years of accumulated trash again. But it's nothing at all like going camping with your family where you put everything in the fucking Winnebago and you call that camping. That ain't gonna fly. You start carrying in a big ass propane tank like this, you're talking about a lot of weight. That's heavier than your backpack by a lot. You're carrying that for a small period of time, maybe up to a mile. You could handle it as long as you have it secured. But then there's the shape of it. It's gonna be pushing into areas of your back that it's just gonna end up hurting. Um, then you've got all these fancy camp stoves that you get, 180 bucks, 260 bucks, 400 bucks for one of these. And it looked complicated. There's a lot of complicated parts in it. And it says titanium. So it's got to be better than everything else. It says titanium, but it's not better than everything else. A rock, a rock is better than titanium. Why is that? Because you can go up to the woods and easily find a rock. If let's say, you're at mile marker 37, there are rocks everywhere. There are sticks everywhere. You don't need a big old propane stove or a big old propane tank or even those little propane tanks. That is all extra weight and it's all extra room, and you got to fit that in your backpack. Now you're starting to get complicated and take things that you don't need because there's already things up there that'll perform the function required. Sticks. You don't need to go up there with camp fuel. There are sticks everywhere. There are pine needles everywhere. And there's a lot of people like, man, you got to use the propane because if you have an open fire, then it's dangerous. I'm like, a propane fire is open. It's flames. Let me show you my non-propane stove right here. In here, it's a different story. In here, I'm in town. This thing right here. What does this thing do? Well, it's a stove, but it's an electric stove. So there's no flame. A lot of people, when they go camping, let's say that you're really roughing it, right? You didn't bring the Winnebago this time. So you got people up there in the mountains like Catfish. Catfish knows a lot of stuff about running a kitchen camp. He'd run a kitchen camp before I ever met him, so he knew what the hell was going on. There's a lot of stuff you go to the store and you're like, man, I need to get one of those. That's like 400 bucks. That'd make my camping trip so much easier. And then you just wasted 400 bucks because once you get up there into the woods, you got everything you need anyway. Between getting some newfangled gadget or gizmo that requires that requires that you pack it in, you also got to pack it out. If you don't got that Winnebago, you might want to think about that. If you and your family absolutely have to live in the 10-man tent, most of us, we lived in lean-tos. We lived in little one-man tents, dome tents, trifold tents, even emergency tents. You know, the one that's just a tube of plastic that's open at both ends? I mean, we got plenty of tents. A lot of people have these ideas like, hey, Sean, I just had this great idea for you guys, homeless people. Would this help you out? And then they give me this thing where they had an idea about either A, wearing thicker clothes, which, yeah, we do that already. We layer up. Um, but they always got these ideas about where to put a new tent, a new tent, a new tent. We have tents. We don't need 10,000 people inventing tents. That's where a lot of people may have compassion, but they're throwing their time and resources at the wrong thing because they just simply don't know. Sure, you care about the homeless and you think that it sucks that homeless people are freezing to death outside. And you're like, oh, well, we could invent a new tent. We have tents. New tents aren't the reason that we're victimized by the police. What was wrong with our old tent? The laws. The laws are what's wrong with our old tents. Your assumptions of us are what's wrong with our old tent. Your ignorance of what it is to have to carry that stuff is what's wrong with your fucking tent. And you're not bad people for having these great and mighty tent ideas. One guy spent 2.5 years developing a tent for the homeless. Now, mind you, you can go to Walmart and for $26, you can get a tent that you can stay in. Sure, it's not the best tent, but it's a tent. And you can pack it up and put it in your backpack. What did this guy invent? All right. People out here in Nebraska who are on farms and have cattle, they got these plastic bins that when a calf is first born, if it's a winter calf, you don't want it to freeze to death. You got to get out there immediately. You got to put it in one of these plastic bins with a heater. It's a two-part bin. You put the cow on the bottom part, and then you close the lid on it, and it leaves it room just enough for its head to stick out. This guy who invented this fancy schmancy tent for us, this thing right here will save lives. It'll save lives. It'll save lives, he says. But you can't pack it up. This thing won't even fit on a fucking bus. If we got to go somewhere, we got to leave that ungainly, unsightly thing somewhere. It can't be folded up. His idea is great, but without a place to put it, you still have to put it somewhere. It still physically exists. Sure, it's got all your stuff in it that keeps you from freezing to death. But when the cops come there and say, hey, you need to move it, you can't just bleep it out of existence. Also, since you can't carry it on your back when you got to go take care of things, like when you go to the feed, you can't carry it on your back. You have to leave it where it's at. A lot of homeless people are homeless because they have physical disabilities that prevent them from, yanking around an 80-pound fucking tent. And it's not an 80-pound tent. I get it. It's like 26 pounds or something, but still, that's a lot of weight. 26 pounds. And I kept explaining, hey, it don't matter how many tents we got if we don't have anywhere we can legally put it. And a lot of folks go, oh, well, why don't you just put it in the woods? See, that's where you start getting into the fact that you don't understand the laws. And a lot of people have it in their heads that the only people who should be allowed to camp in the mountains are families with kids who have money and a house of their own that they can go back home to. If you don't have a home of your own, we don't want you in the woods either. That seems to be the way that Americans think, especially park rangers and especially police officers. We get blamed for everything. Some family of six doesn't know how to pick up their trash. We show up at camp. We get told that we've been there for 2 weeks, even though we just showed up to camp. The officer who's talking to us, or the forest ranger who is talking to us, knows that he's lying out his ass at you, but he doesn't care. He doesn't want to see you up there. Most of you with families, you go, well, we want to go camping and we get there and all we see is all these hobos. Like, geez, there's a lot of people up there who aren't hobos. And number two, hobos have just as much right to live as you do, or at least I believe that they should. Just because you make excuses for the predators doesn't make what those predators did okay. It doesn't. When you've got a kitchen camp, you got to pay attention to not only what it is that you're doing and what you're going through, but you got to pay attention to who's around you and who's around the camp. You got to separate camp intelligently. You can't have just one camp for all homeless people. Most of us can't stand the alcoholics. Most of us homeless people cannot stand the alcoholics. From what I've been noticing in houses, people in houses can't really stand the alcoholics either unless they're alcoholics. They also got a way to get away from it. We don't. We don't have that safety of the roof over our head. Me, I got a roof over my head, and it does provide me more safety than staying behind the dumpster behind the Cheesecake Factory. But you don't need to pack in a stove. That's useless. It's counterproductive. You don't need to pack in fuel. It adds more weight. It's counterproductive. There's stuff that you probably aren't going to be able to just find as readily available as rocks and sticks. There's some stuff when you make a kitchen camp that you really might want to get because it doesn't grow on trees. Plastic bags don't grow on trees. And a lot of folks might say, well, why would you want to litter with all that trash out there? Why would you want to take more plastic bags up there? Well, it's waterproofing, first of all. And second of all, it's not something that we're planning on just throwing away. If we put stuff in one of those trash bags, it's getting ferried to somewhere. We might take all of the garbage in, two or three camps around us and burn it all, just like they do out at the Nebraska farm. We still have farmers who do burns. They have burn pits. But you're not allowed to do that in the mountains, and you're sure as hell not allowed to do it when you're homeless. A lot of your ideas that you have are based on your situation. You tell somebody to do something that you in your situation could do, and that's fucking great. But if they're not able to do it, your assumption that they're able to, and you downing on them and berating them and degrading them because you didn't get what you want, that's not okay. So this guy here, he's got a lot of really cool inventions, and a lot of them, like his camp stove doesn't have 30,000 titanium pieces. It doesn't have a whole bunch of spiky stuff that's going to get caught on stuff if it's on the outside of your pack, and if it's on the inside of the pack, it's going to poke holes in your pack, poke holes in the gear that you've got in your pack. It's going to snag on it. It's going to all sorts of stuff. So this guy's making stuff out of wood. He still needs a shop to make this stuff out of wood. And he's got a bunch of little metal things that he made. He still, of course, needs a shop to make that metal stuff. This is stuff he's got the skills up in the mountains to make. But he's also making stuff that is smaller, lighter, more compact, stuff that he can actually carry with him. The idea of the go bag and the get home bag, both of those should be exactly the same thing. As far as if there's an emergency and you need to leave right fucking now, yeah, you're not going to have time to go collect all that stuff while your house is on fire. You're not going to be able to collect that stuff while people are shooting at your house. You're not going to survive the situation if you don't get the hell out of the house quickly. And there are a lot of situations like that. Like a lot of y'all, you go, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm somebody who's had more than one friend have their house burned down. More than one family member, too. When I was over at Candace Bonderon's mom's house here a lot of years ago, the shop in Boulder on 75th and Arapahoe, it was on fire. The shop was on fire. And it was on the fucking news. Like, imagine my surprise. I leave my shop for a day or two. I come here to Chapel, Nebraska. I go over to visit with Miss Lori, and guess what? They got the news on, and on the news is the shop right next to mine on fire. You can see my shop right there in the fucking uh, sky cam or whatever they call it, where they go for with the helicopter. I mean, it's just. But that also came down to the groundskeeper guy being an alcoholic and fucking having all sorts of stuff in there that was all sorts of flammable just laying about. And when he dropped something and spill it, it would just lay there. I mean, that dude stole from almost everybody there, and he's the groundskeeper. But you can't say nothing because where are you going to go? Where are you going to take your stuff? You just got to let the dude do it. So you've got this fucking big ass tent that you can't put on your back. You can't take it on a bus. You can't drag it everywhere with you. This thing is just a fucking burden. You had a great idea, and in your head, as someone who has never experienced homelessness, this is the best idea in the fucking world. I've seen probably restricted number calling me again. Boulder Rights Watch. That's mostly for the homeless. It was supposedly created for the homeless, and there's a lot of people in there who try to contribute, and they always have these new tent ideas. I mean, 10 years of trying to get property, and all these people, instead of working together and pooling their resources to get a piece of property, they want to keep asking the government. No, the government isn't going to do squat for you. They don't fucking care. You're not rich. They don't care. And every time I start explaining to them, hey, man, I can't carry that on my back. And I still don't have a place to put it legally. 14 days. That's how long you're allowed to camp. 14 days. Now there's state parks and federal parks. Each one of them has a little bit different rules. But the camping thing, you're only allowed to camp a certain amount of days per year, or a certain amount of days in a given period of time. So the government controls every part of what you're allowed to do. But if you as a family decide that you're going to camp longer than 14 days, there aren't that big consequences for you. There aren't. It's just a warning and you can leave. If you want to start an argument with them, or say they're looking for an argument and you want to argue with them, well, then you might have some consequences. If you're homeless, you don't get that far. If you're homeless, they show up, they're fucking dickheads from the fucking start. And you guys tell us how the cops are, how we deserve it, how we chose it. No, we didn't choose for you guys to have a scapegoat. You guys can endure a lot of hell as long as you have someone to scapegoat. You guys put up with a lot of shit from your fucking boss at work as long as you got someone at home you can take it out on. That was a great thing about kitchen camp. We had A camp and B camp. A camp was alcohol camp. I stayed away from those guys. B camp is bud camp. It's mostly pot smokers. But also, B camp is also the people who are sober. Between hanging out with, there's a lot of you who are sober, right? Would you rather hang out with a stoner or an alcoholic? Which one is more likely to beat on you? Most assaults involve alcohol unless they're involving children And children do fight. Alcoholics, they have about the same mentality, except they have less control. Yes, I just said alcoholics have less control than children, and I do mean it. The shit that Shannon Alvarado went through the whole time I was there, like all of those problems all came from Shannon's alcoholism. Every issue that she had there all stemmed from her alcoholism. And her alcoholism had a great effect on my situation. But I'm not allowed to say that or I'm a horrible person, right? So up at B camp, sometimes you get people at A camp that would show up and say, hey, we got an issue down at our camp. We got some guys that are fucking standing outside of their tents with machetes because they think somebody stole their bottle. Well, you need usually about 5 or 6 sober people to show up. That is about how many people it can take to de-escalate a situation like that, because here you are with a whole bunch of alcoholics who have to have their alcohol or they're complete assholes. And now you've got 10 of these guys who have to have their alcohol, who are now paranoid that somebody's going to take their alcohol. Even if you're not the alcoholic who had shit stolen from your tent, you're still standing outside of your tent with a machete or a fucking stick or something. Get the fuck away from my stuff. Get the fuck away from my stuff. Holy fucking hell. But then you can't turn a blind eye to it. You know that if there is a situation or altercation in the woods and someone gets injured, hurt, killed, they're on the news. What happens when they're on the news? It makes it bad for all of us. The general public says, hey, we shouldn't allow any of those homeless people up there. That's for us and our kids to enjoy. These people aren't paying taxes. We are. See, we got a Winnebago. Obviously, we're paying taxes. You don't pay attention to the fact that most homeless people have jobs. Most homeless people have jobs. The addiction rate among people in houses is far higher and far greater than it is among the homeless. The homeless teeter at right around 25%. 25% of homeless people are addicts. And that is a huge fucking number. I agree. But here's why you don't get to use that number to punish us for existing. Because 1 in 4 of us might be an addict. It's okay for you to do these things, right? That's your justification. Here in Chapel, Nebraska, we're looking at a different scenario here. We're looking at between 40 and 60% of the population being addicted to alcohol. That's just alcohol. That's not counting pharmaceuticals. That's not counting illicit, illegal drugs. That's not counting methamphetamines. That's not counting heroin. 40 to 60% just alcoholics because they live in a house, they have more rights than I do. If I'm sober and they're drunk, but they live in a house, I'm automatically wrong. Anonymous typed, were B camp just for pot smokers or were there hard junkies as well? It depended on the hard junkie. We did have up at B camp, we had a couple of heroin users that were at B camp because they couldn't be with A camp. They have extreme situations that stemmed from abuse, obviously with alcoholics. So even though they were addicted to heroin, we did allow them at B camp. You're not allowed to pull out your needles or anything like that. We don't want to see your stuff. And if we see your stuff, you do have to leave the camp immediately. See, you're not, when you're running a kitchen camp, you're not worried about one person. You can't just worry about one person. Everybody's safety is at risk. One person running around the woods with a fucking machete looking for an excuse makes it bad for all of us. The meth users, they pretty much didn't go to kitchen camps. What purpose is a meth user going to have for a kitchen camp? They're probably not going to leave the city. Their access to their methamphetamines is in the city, and as quickly as they consume it and as little money as they have, well, as soon as they're on meth, they have to immediately start hunting for more meth to try to get some before they come down. So they pretty well don't show up at our fucking camps. Upon occasion, yes. There are also a lot of times where somebody's a pretty all right person, but you met them when they were sober. You didn't know that they were strung out on heroin. And then you get them up to the kitchen camp, and, they're all fine and dandy, and you help them set up their tent, and you think everything's all right. And then they've been in their tent for 30 minutes to an hour. And you go, man, I hope that person's all right. They probably just need some sleep. If it's someone on heroin, they will usually just sleep it off. But sometimes they get out of their tent and they're all fucked up. And you're like, hold on a second. You were sober when you went in there. What's going on? And those of us who have been around druggies our entire lives, I mean, we can tell who's on heroin and who's on meth, who's on alcohol. But then again, when you got this idea that autistic people are retarded, like we don't have any fucking clue what's going on around us. Like you, who aren't there, know better about what's going on than we do. Kind of like that dude who had the fucking big ass tent. He had a great idea. I'm on foot though. I got to find somebody with a vehicle if I want to take that up to my camp in the mountains. And then I only have 14 days with that thing. And this thing is big and white. I mean, it sticks out like a sore fucking thumb no matter where you put it. But no matter what, Darren O'Connor, who is never homeless, he's the one who was one of the people who started Colorado Rights Watch or Border Rights Watch. But he has never been homeless. He's got ideas, and his ideas are great and wonderful, and he has had some experience with working with the homeless. But he's never run a kitchen camp. He doesn't know what it's like to have to be stuck in that situation. Darren O'Connor stayed a few nights out to protest. It's cute. That's a choice. If you're sleeping outside to protest, you've chosen to sleep outside. And I'm glad that he protested. A lot of us are. But there's also the fact that he was just words. He was just words. And this man, because he has a roof over his head, where the Daily Camera and other such news agencies, they'll listen to Darren about the homeless. They won't listen to the homeless about the homeless. Whenever I was out there and they had somebody that came down from the college or from one of these agencies to go ask about the homeless or the news agencies even, I noticed they nearly always looked for the worst possible example. Like, hey, there's 6 homeless people over there and they're all working together and they're all sober. And then there's that alcoholic who's been laying in the same spot for a week. Sure, he gets up and he goes to wherever he goes at night so that he doesn't get in trouble. But he's back every single day and he's just as drunk every single day. And the news media, they come down there wanting a story. And who do they go and talk to? They go and talk to that alcoholic. So then we've got this alcoholic basically being presented as the face of homelessness. Here in Chapel, Nebraska, with that high ass alcoholism rate. They blame everything on blacks and Mexicans. Now, is that entirely true? No, they also blame everything on the homeless. It's the homeless fault that you're broke because you spend $50 on alcohol a night. It must be. That's the mentality in a small town like this. This is the worst place for me to be, but given the situation that I've been through for the last 4 years, it's the only place I got. I'd like to go to Boulder, but I can't because of slander. I can't go anywhere safely because of the slander. That slander makes you a target for the rest of your life. And when you are called mentally ill, you don't have the right to defend yourself like many of you believe that I do. Oh, well, Sean, they can't do that. It's illegal. You know what? It was also illegal for that officer to rape that woman on the hood of his vehicle, was it not? But what did he do? He raped that woman on the hood of his vehicle. It was illegal for Waylon Lolatai to assault me. But what did he do? He fucking assaulted me. It's illegal for these officers to omit evidence. But what did they do? They omitted evidence. It's illegal for these officers to refuse to give me their names. But what did they do? In many cases, refused to give me their names. Refused. That's against the law. But it doesn't matter if you're called mentally ill. It doesn't matter how many laws they broke because nobody fucking cares. A lot of these people who pretended that they care, I say they pretended to care because they never fucking spoke up. Later on, when I spoke up, they're like, hey, Sean, you're trying to make me look bad. I'm like, no, I'm not. Well, such and such called me and said this, 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 and this. I'm like, somebody who threatened to murder me and my friends and family called you up. You're one of my friends. You're one of the people that these people are threatening to fucking kill. And between looking at both sides and treating me like shit, you choose to treat me like shit. Everybody does that. When you are called mentally ill, your guilt is assumed. You can't tell people that you're autistic or they assume that you're mentally retarded. You must be wrong because you're autistic. You must be wrong because you think differently. A lot of people wanted to shove that at me. Oh, Sean, you just perceive things different. You just perceive things different. No, let me explain something to you. We teach that shit to boys and girls. Girls just perceive stuff different. Boys just perceive stuff different. No, you're taught to treat them different. You're taught to listen to a girl, but not a boy. You were taught that a girl can be a victim and a boy cannot. You're taught that girls need sympathy and boys just need to man up. You teach boys that they owe women just for existing. And we're told that nobody owes us shit. Telling me that something is illegal doesn't make any difference if you're not there to prevent them from doing something illegal. That's where preventative measures come in. All that situation with Waylon Lolatai could have been avoided by them not hiring the motherfucker because he's got a history of violence. I have to look over my shoulder for predators everywhere that I go. I don't get to see my loved ones like most of you get to. And it doesn't occur to you how important that is for your mental health. Sure, you and your sister argue over stupid shit like the Martindale girls. That's my shoes. Oh my God, Mom, that's my pair of pants. Yes, I've seen Pam Martindale get ripped out, get her ass ripped by her own daughter for wearing her daughter's pants. That's the kind of shit that you guys argue over. That's the kind of stuff that you will stream and shout at each other for days over. When Jackie Martindale and Justine Martindale were arguing over I don't know what it was, pair of pants, something. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. I remember how loud it was and how hysterical those girls were over stupid shit. When I went over there, I had a major issue. I wasn't having a panic attack for no fucking reason. That's not the restricted number, so I'm going to call that number back. Y'all want to hate on us for shit that's not our choice, and then you tell us that it's our choice, or you try to say, "Oh well, at least you're not black." It's really screwed up. It really is. Like here I am, I'm fighting for the rights of black people because those are my rights too. I'm fighting for the rights of women because those are my rights too. I'm fighting for the rights of the LGBT because those are my rights too. But from each and every one of these groups, I have people who tell me that I have no right to speak because I'm not gay. I have no right to speak because I'm not a woman. I have no right to speak because I'm not black. Meanwhile, I'm going through the same abuse that they are, but I can't say anything because then I'm the bad guy. Y'all got no idea how many times I've been assaulted for being gay. I've never been gay, ever, but I still get assaulted over it. It's part of having Tourette syndrome and doing that with your eyes. Sometimes it's just one eye, sometimes it's the other. I got Tourette syndrome. I'm not necessarily even noticing that I'm doing it when I'm doing it. I have to spend 24 hours a day trying not to have Tourette syndrome, which doesn't hurt anybody because y'all will hurt me for having Tourette syndrome. But also, Tourette syndrome is one of those things where if you tell somebody you got Tourette's, they automatically assume you're a retarded person. If you wink at people or you have a weird tick, like let's say you're one of the very, 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 very few people who curses because of Tourette syndrome. Well, you should probably let people know that you have Tourette syndrome so that they don't punish you for having Tourette syndrome. You should probably let them know that that is one of your ticks. What do you do when they don't care? Or when they go, oh, well, he's got Tourette syndrome, when they're trying to pretend like your Tourette syndrome is a bad thing. They're like, oh, well, he was playing with some stuff in Walmart and it's got buttons on it. And we were afraid that he might accidentally press the alarm button. So we had to preemptively prevent the retard from doing that. That's pretty well how we get treated. But then when it's a situation where Tourette's is to your benefit, they want to pretend that it doesn't exist. A lot of people, the reason that they choose you to victimize is because you're homeless. And it's well and justified in their head because you're homeless. But then you didn't actually do anything wrong, so that they got to grasp for straws. They go, oh, well, there was a homeless guy last year who stole our change jar. Well, was that homeless person a male or a female? Because maybe you should stop all males or females from doing that. What color was the skin of the person who stole your jar? Maybe you should take it out on them. Oh, yes, you can. It is acceptable to take it out on the homeless. It's not acceptable socially to take it out on any of these other groups. It's not okay to bully a gay person for being gay. But if you're mean to a straight person for being gay, it's okay. It's screwed. All right, he's calling back, so I got to let you go. Thank y'all for listening to me. And don't take a stove up there with you. Take a shovel.